Today we're in for a timely discussion, and we're in for a timely discussion today and thought leaders discussing the reasons for their headquarter relocations from California to Texas. Yes. Adriana Cruz, Executive Director for the State of Texas Economic Development and Tourism Office, will moderate this conversation. But before we hear from one of the panelists and the book author, Ken Miller, he's going to give us a quick update on summary of his book, which he has done many research on, why businesses are moving to San Antonio. To Texas. I'm all for San Antonio, but they can move elsewhere, I guess. I even crossed that out and put Texas, but anyway. To introduce Ken Miller today is my good friend Chris Corso. He's the Director of Client Development at Joris and our title sponsor for the event. So on behalf of the Chamber, thank you, Chris, for y'all's generosity, and we also appreciate your sponsorship as always. You're welcome.
So good afternoon, everyone, and on behalf of Gary Joris and Joris General Contractors, I'm Chris Corso, and we are actually delighted to be the title sponsor for the inaugural Innovators and Leaders Luncheons today, which actually, it aligns nice with Joris's mission of transforming people and places. You know, Joris General Contractors was recently named the General Contractor of the Year, not only by the San Antonio Business Journal, not for this year, but last year as well. And we feel like that part of that success is tied into the fact that our leaders encourage our people to use innovation to partner with our clients to create success. I also want to thank Christina, who's not here today, but of course the North Chamber and the partnership that we have with them, the staff of the North Chamber that put this program together today, thank you very much. And of course to the Board of Directors at the North Chamber. It's a wonderful organization, and Joris is very much glad to be a part of that. So without further ado, I want to introduce Ken. Ken is a professor of state and local government at Claremont McKenna College, and he is also the director of Rose Institute at State and Local Government as well. He is the author of Texas versus California, A History of the Struggle for the Future of America, which examines the rivalry between the nation's most powerful states. I will mention that Mr. Miller's book is available right outside the door here for purchase. I look forward to getting a copy of it. And Ken, I'll ask you to get up now and have a few remarks. Thank you very much.
Well, Chris, thanks for that introduction. And it's great to be here in San Antonio and Texas today. I bring greetings from California. I'm not the only Californian in Texas here today, because there are a lot of people who are actually moving, as you know, from California to Texas for a lot of different reasons, which we can talk about. Not only individuals, but also businesses. And that's one of the sub-themes of the book, Texas versus California, that I worked on, and it was published just a couple of years ago. I was very interested in this rivalry that has developed between the nation's two largest and most powerful states, Texas and California. And as a native Californian, I had grown up, sort of really understood and appreciated a lot of the great things about California, and then also over time witnessed a lot of frustration that people had with the state, and increasingly saw people saying, you know, it's become a place that, you know, I have loved, but I'm choosing to leave. And so I was curious about that, trying to understand what it was that was drawing people to leave California and move to other places. And the number one destination for people leaving the state of California is actually Texas, which is an interesting, it's not next door, it's not Arizona, it's not Nevada, it's not Oregon, it's not the most proximate states, but it's Texas. And there's reasons that people are moving from California to Texas. What the book does is it tries to explore the roots of these two states that have, in many ways, a lot of similarities. They're both part of New Spain and Mexico, and came into the United States as part of westward expansion in the mid-19th century. They both became states right around the Mexican-American War, Texas just beforehand and California just after. They became states within 5 years of each other, and they became destinations for Americans moving across the continent to Texas and also to California. They were states that were high-growth states and eventually became the most populous and most economically powerful states in the country. We think of them now as being politically polarized, with California being the dominant blue state and Texas the dominant red state. And in many ways, that's true, but it hasn't always been that way. For most of its history, Texas was a Democratic state and California was a Republican state, and they flipped, interestingly. And actually, for most of their history, there was a lot more overlap in the politics and the political orientation of the two states. But within the last generation or so, they've divided politically in very interesting ways, and they've developed two competing political models and also competing economic models. And that's what I'm going to want to be focusing on with you today, is the different economic approaches of these two states. So California is, as everybody knows, it's a high tax, high regulation, high cost state. It's also in some ways a highly successful state. Silicon Valley is probably the most successful economic location in the world today, in terms of wealth creation and the creation of new businesses and products and all of that. That's not necessarily because of the policies of the state of California. That's the legacy of investments in universities in the Bay Area, of the concentration of venture capital. A lot of capital in many forms has been invested in the state over the course of the past century or so, and we're now sort of reaping the benefits of those investments over time. And Texas, for its own part, has created a competing model, which is low cost, low tax, low regulation, and it's becoming the place of choice for a lot of businesses who are frustrated by the high cost of doing business in California and other blue states. So you look at Illinois and New York, and they have similar patterns of California where people, residents and businesses are choosing out of those places and choosing into red states and places like Texas. I'll just close these opening remarks with a quote from Elon Musk. So Elon Musk is probably the most famous single person to leave California and move to Texas, to move his business venture, Tesla, from California to Texas. And people wanted to know, why are you doing that, right? So he was embedded in the Silicon Valley ecosystem. It attracted a lot of people, including the founders of Facebook and Google and all these people who came to Northern California, to Silicon Valley. And Musk was one of those people, and he built his company there, but he's moved it from California to Texas, and people have asked him why. He said, if a team has been winning too long, they tend to get a little complacent, a little entitled, and then they don't win the championship anymore. And California has been winning for too long. And I just see it in so many ways in the public policies of California. The people making policies just take it for granted that the state is going to be successful. And they think the businesses will just tolerate high taxes, high regulation, high costs, and that they'll choose to stay there because they've always been there, or because that's been the place to do business. But that kind of complacency and that kind of arrogance, truthfully, is beginning to be seen in a bigger and bigger way as companies have said, enough. And I'm going to give one more little Elon Musk example for this point. There's a state senator, actually assemblywoman in California. She just left the legislature to become the head of a labor union. Her name's Lorena Gonzalez, and she tweets a lot. And when California was getting involved in some conflict with Elon Musk, I think it had to do with COVID and the closing of the auto plant, she tweeted out basically, F Elon Musk. right? This is one of our leading legislators in California saying to, at that time, and maybe still, the wealthiest person in the world, right? And the founder of these great companies in California, basically F you, right? And Elon Musk tweeted back, message received. And then he moved his business to Texas. Okay, so that's kind of the context for a lot of the business experience in California. A lot of businesses feel like the government of the state is basically saying, we don't really need to pay attention to you. And a lot of other states, like Texas, are saying, okay, then let's talk. Thanks.
That was quite a story. Got to make sure my tweets are not on, because I would never say that, but I'm also not a Democrat or a conservative that, people are watching my tweets as my 2 followers that have me. So anyway, enjoy your meal. We'll get back to the great conversation that's going to happen in a few minutes, and Chris Corso will introduce our panelists in about 15, 20 minutes. Thank you.
I have some interesting statistics to share with you on Texas and California. From 2015 to 2022, there have been 245 headquarter relocations to the state, with the potential to create tens of thousands of jobs, and more than half of them are from California, from one state alone. And we've held the rank for attracting the most companies from California, which has been the case for more than a decade, according to a report by Spectrum Location Solutions. And last year, we attracted more California headquarters than any other year in our state's history, with 78 corporate headquarter relocations from California. So in my mind, this discussion is really interesting and really timely, because California is the gift that keeps on giving for my job. But Ken, I want to start with you, and thank you so much for the summary that you gave us on the book, and how much Texas and California had in common, both large populous states, both border Mexico, both with large Hispanic populations, and we took very different paths, right, to growth. So talk a little bit about those triggers that kind of caused that divergence, and then I want to talk a little bit about labor in particular and talent. Yeah.
Well, thanks. Is that better? California and Texas have had a lot of similarities. You could sort of run across lots of them. They were both central to the space industry, for example, in the 1960s and beyond. They both have a lot of agriculture, have developed manufacturing, high growth states. For a long time, they were both relatively low-cost states. California, in the post-war period, was a place where middle-class people could come from around the country and buy a home, and they would be able to get a home with a lot, and in a suburban community, as California suburbanized in a big way, created basically the concept of the American suburb. And so in a way that was mirrored largely in Texas. And so you saw many, many similarities, but there were, along the way, some differences. And I trace it back to the origins of these two states, that Texas was largely populated by Americans coming from the South. And they brought sort of a more conservative political and economic culture. People who later came, especially in the post-World War II period, from the North, once the South got air conditioning and it became a place where Northerners felt like they could happily live. A lot of people were attracted to a culture that was, entrepreneurial and business-oriented, and created opportunities for people to have middle-class lives and prosper and flourish, right? And California for a long time was that as well. Over time, though, however, there were differences that showed up that were rooted, if you think about California in its early history, which was, it was more oriented toward the North. It had always a progressive streak politically, which manifests itself in a greater sort of belief in the role of government and having a bigger role in society, which is now sort of played out in a big way. Also, labor unions were introduced very early on in California, especially in Northern California, in San Francisco. Southern California was basically an open shop. Los Angeles was famously open shop and had a right-to-work orientation. Northern California was dominated by organized labor. And ultimately, the state as a whole became very, very oriented toward organized labor. So the combination of a sort of a progressive political orientation coupled with an alignment with labor sort of made the state more democratic politically as the two parties sort of separated along those lines, and created basically a political and economic culture that was oriented toward that side of the spectrum. Whereas Texas, deep in its roots, was always more conservative. Even though it was democratic for most of its history, it was a conservative form of Democratic Party. And as it evolved over time, some of those features, like not being that welcoming to organized labor, not being more oriented toward sort of a low regulation, business-friendly climate, has expressed itself in a way that now, as the nation as a whole is sorting out into sort of a red and blue orientation, Texas has become sort of the model for how you do a more sort of conservative economic and political system. And basically, given the choice in our country, where companies and capital and workers can move freely between states, you get the choice. Are you going to be in a high-cost, high-regulation, high-tax state, or are you going to situate yourself in a more business-friendly state? And both workers and companies are increasingly making the choice to go toward the more business-friendly place.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about the workers and the talent migration in a minute.
Yeah.
But you hit upon a couple of topics on the choices that companies get to make. And we have with us today a company that made that choice and the CEO of the company. And so, Joost, for those who may not be familiar, tell us about your project, tell us about what you're going to do in Texas, and then why. Why did you pick San Antonio and Texas for this opportunity?
Well, thanks for having us. DeLorean, you probably know from the 1980s, a very iconic brand. A couple of years ago, we started this project. Can we electrify the old car? And we had it done. Then the Obama administration at that time didn't ratify the paperwork that associated it with that. The Trump administration never did. So we said, well, this brand is really so strong. We have an opportunity to bring it back as a full-line OEM. So we got the talent together about a year ago. We started working with the original designers in Italy, a lot of the engineers. We talked to a lot of people. And then late last year, we said, okay, we have the capital, the people, the process, the marketing ideas. We can bring this back. And then is the journey of where do you go? I was living in California at that time, Southern California. A lot of my startup colleagues with all the other startups in the world are all in California. Lucid, Rivian, Fisker, and there's a whole bunch more. So it was the logical place for us to say, well, why wouldn't you be here? And I was working at a startup electric company at that time. We just built a factory in Moreno Valley, which is in the Inland Empire. And it took us 3 years to just get a permit for a paint shop. So, no, that was out. Then you can say, okay, well, if we don't do manufacturing here, can we get the talent in? And it became a chasing of talent. Where does talent in the automotive world live, especially in the US? It's Michigan or California. Michigan, highly trained, big three, awesome, 100-year experience. You don't have to explain to anybody. You just grab somebody, put them on a seat, and they're awesome. Or California, and good ideas, Silicon Valley mentality, no rules exist. I think it was when I worked for Elon at the start of Model S in 2012. His comment was always, if Ford does it this way, you're not allowed to do it that way. Find another way. And that mentality is very much California and very entrepreneurial, very much out-of-the-box thinking. Fail fast, fail early, and move on. And then we're looking at cost. And again, regulatory compliance of how do you set up in California? Is anybody really interested? Because you're number X on the line when you start talking to people like the economic development teams there. So we started with a gross list of 8 states, 8 cities. We visited them. Some of them threw a lot of money at us. As a startup, was like, yay, because cash is king, or pre-revenue. And then ultimately we ended up with 2. Texas was one of them, South Carolina was the other. Both had an interesting vision of building up an automotive corridor. San Antonio was more manufacturing oriented. I think South Carolina was trying to get above that and trying to get more brain oriented. But San Antonio and Texas in general, you're growing so fast. Tesla just moved next door, a lot of suppliers are moving in. Toyota has been here for 20 years, and I know it's just manufacturing, but just manufacturing means you have production engineering, you have supply chain engineering, you have a lot of brain power here. And then you start looking a little bit further, the school system. If I go here, I can import talent, but what do I do in 4 or 5 years when I need to grow? And then you look at your university system, you look at Trinity, you look at Texas A&M, and you find people that are extremely open to start building programs today that will give me a pipeline of talent in 4 or 5 years from now. Because you cannot just look at the next 90 days. And we didn't find that in other places. It was really, really interesting to see how this organization worked. And then lastly, what really did it for us was really local. I mean, the local development team here, economic development team, was willing to do things that might not have been always according to the book. But we needed those decisions at that time. And it was just like, okay, these people really want you. They welcome you. They open their networks. They tell us when we're stupid, and we are stupid too, don't get me wrong. We make mistakes, but it's really interesting to see that they want you to be part of the fabric. And one of the things we as a company, as a young startup here, almost the city back, is that we won't be a stranger. That's why we're sitting here today. We want to be part of the local fabric. We are now San Antonio, and we took that decision. We're moving our families. Our kids are going to school here. And it's really awesome to see the welcome we got as a startup. So that was really a lot of different reasons why we moved.
Excellent reasons. And we are so proud that you've chosen to make Texas and San Antonio your home. Yeah, that deserves a round of applause. And as we talk about talent and following talent, so Texas has had significant population growth. The last census showed we added 4 million over the last 10 years, which is more than any other state in the nation. We added 2 congressional seats because of that, whereas California lost a congressional seat because of population loss, as did New York. So as talent is able to move around the country, and Ken, you said it, they're choosing to locate. So we have this incoming group coming in, and then we have the existing population, which is growing in the state, which is being educated and training programs. So talk a little bit about the talent perspective.
It's absolutely a good thing to have population growth. So California, for the first time in its history, lost population during the pandemic. It lost population again last year. It had approached 40 million people. And I remember 15 years ago, it was projected that California would be at 50 million people by now. But the growth curve, which had been super steep for California over the course of its history, has flattened out and now is actually on a downward track. Whereas Texas is on a steep incline. Now, growth has all sorts of challenges. You need to be able to accommodate new people, build infrastructure, schools, all that kind of thing. But it's a good problem to have because you're bringing in human capital, which is essential to the flourishing of an economy, right? And so it provides opportunities for new ventures, new jobs to accommodate these people, and the talent pool, especially if you are bringing in people who have special talents, and so you want to not just be growing in terms of gross population, but also recruiting and attracting people to your communities who are going to be adding value in a big way, right? Like this gentleman, Joost, next to me. He's a new resident of Texas, and he's bringing great value to this community in San Antonio as a newcomer, right? And it seems to me that this state, part of the reason it grows so, it flourishes in terms of growth is because it's welcoming to newcomers. I mean, I've witnessed that just sort of spending time here over the last 5 years or so, that this is a place which is open to people coming and being part of the community here. So one thing I would say is you want to try to recruit folks like him, like Joost, who are going to add value in a big way, and the growth itself will be a positive for you because it creates all these new opportunities. Finally, it seems to me one thing that California did right, not just now or the last 10 years, but over the last century and more, was creating a world-class university system. Mm-hmm. That's part of what made it was, largely the public university system, but also great private universities like Stanford and Caltech and those places. And those institutions are what created Silicon Valley, what created the aerospace industry in Southern California, because you have these highly educated people, the kind of people that Joost is talking about, which in the automotive industry exist only in Detroit or in California at this point. They cluster together. And so what you want to create is these, whether it's through universities or by other means, creating these talent pools that reinforce themselves. And if you can sort of create in San Antonio and Austin, this corridor here, an automotive cluster with Tesla, Toyota, DeLorean, and those kinds of companies, and people are going to be drawn to it, young engineers and workers and others, because it's going to be the place where it happens, right? And that's what Silicon Valley is for tech. You want that. It's what Houston is for energy. You want to be able to create more of these clusters within your state because that's what creates real economic wealth and value in a state.
So when we do our announcements or when I do presentations about economic development in the state and the prospect activity that we're seeing, I have a slide. Some of you may remember the stories in the 1800s of the folks that moved to Texas. They would put up signs that said, "Gone to Texas." So that's always the graphic that I use in these stories because we see people, talent, migrating and choosing Texas for the cost of living, the cost of real estate, the quality of life, which kudos also to the city of San Antonio and to our cities for investing in the quality of life aspects and the beautification and making sure that you have good schools and you have a great place for people like Joost and his employees and his families to live. And I want to talk, I'm going to switch a little bit and talk, Joost, you talked about regulatory compliance and regulatory issues. I know when Elon Musk came and met with Governor Abbott, there was a need for speed. He said, I have a need for speed. I'm looking to build this plant and it needs to be operational in 18 months. And I don't know if y'all have driven eastern Travis County on SH 130 and seen a mile-long building. That was built in 18 months. And so the regulatory compliance, the permits, the ease of doing permits, Governor Abbott committed to Mr. Musk, you're going to have what you need from the state agency perspective, from TCQ, from whatever at the state level, and then of course the local levels and their permitting process. But you were kind of taken aback by the California answer. So what have you found in Texas?
I think there's one misnomer that people need to realize. The result of Texas permitting is exactly the same what California permitting is. So the economic impacts, the environmental impacts, the social impacts, they go all through the same processes. Okay, there's a little differences, but it's not major. The end result is you're clean, you're safe, you're legal, and you can operate. It's how you get there. It is, when you're in California and you're trying to get a permit, you have to go to 14 different people, and every one of them has a certain lead time, and none of them you know up front, and it just takes forever. When you go to Texas, and we ask the economic development team, or even our local councilwoman, who is awesome, help me, where do I go? Go to that person, ask that question, and it's done. And if they can't do it, they tell you it will be done in 3 weeks. I think the openness of government is very different. In California, the government is opaque. It is you ask, and at a certain moment in the future, you will get an answer back. Here you go to the government, and whether it's local or city or state, you get an answer of how long it will take, plus or minus a day. But I mean, it's really, really good. I think that was a big difference. It's just how the government here feels like it's partnering for the benefit of the community. Business is regarded as a jumping point for people to get better in their life. We had a good discussion with the mayor here. He's very concerned about housing costs, social programs. We had negative discussions with some of our competitors here. Well, if you're coming here, you're going to raise the price for everybody else. That's not how you look at this. It is, look at the south side where we are. I had a great discussion with the Texas A&M president. 98% of the kids in that school are underprivileged. What a wonderful idea to try to combine business with school and bring that all up. Yeah, I know your cheap warehouse worker will go from 13 bucks an hour to 17 bucks an hour. But the city, the state, and everybody, I think, sees the bigger picture of if we help businesses come here, if we help businesses improve the local community, the water level will rise for everybody. And I think that's the difference. In California, it's different there in the sense that make everybody dependent, and then that's great. Here, it is make everybody better. And I think that is really the big difference for me, what I see from a regulatory and from a state perspective.
That's really very well said. That's really interesting that Texas has a streak, a sense of independence, right? A sense of, by my one boot at a time, and I'll do it myself, and I'm a small business owner, I'm a, whatever, I'm gonna, make the effort. And I will brag on one of our state agency partners, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality, because they work with manufacturers, they do pre-permit meetings, and just like you said, they have to follow the law and they have to follow regulation, but they are working with you and they are telling you, and they're very transparent in the process. So, I think our state agency partners do a great job. So one of the things, Ken, that you mentioned briefly was the proximity to Mexico, right? Both Yep. California and Texas have a border with Mexico. San Antonio, of course, being closer down, further south and closer to the border, has a lot of business and activity with Mexico. So what role does Texas's central location in North America and proximity to Mexico, what role does that play in influencing either companies like yours, Joost, or other companies that you've done research on, Ken, on choosing Texas?
Yeah, I'll start with the centrality in the United States, and I'll talk about Mexico. It does seem to me that being in the center of the United States is an advantage because it is easier to get to any part of the country from any of the major airports in Texas to go to the East Coast or the West Coast in 2.5 hours, as opposed to trying to cross the continent in 5 or 6 hours, which is what it takes to fly. And that just creates all sorts of advantages for your employees if they need to be going to meetings or meeting with customers or that kind of thing, to be central as opposed to on the periphery. California has some advantages in being closer to Asia, but it's a super long way away to Asia anyway. And the East Coast has some closer proximity to Europe, but it's not a major difference. It seems like within the continental United States, it's an added advantage to be central as opposed to on the periphery. So that's one thing. In terms of Mexico, I would say from my understanding of the relationships, Texas has a much more sort of integrated relationship with Mexico than California does. That just sort of the cross-border business relationships and all of that it just seems healthier in a lot of ways. And there's like a great opportunity from a business standpoint, partly because Texas is closer to like the central population centers of Mexico than California is. But in other ways, there's just a great opportunity for cross-border business development, it seems to me, on energy, on manufacturing, on all sorts of things. And so I do think that's an interesting and important advantage that Texas has.
Joost, any thoughts?
Yeah, for us it was, Texas is close to Mexico. Mexico is one of the biggest producers of cars in the world. If you look how close Monterrey is, Monterrey has one of the world's best automotive engineering universities. You can go there, have somebody on a TM2 within 2 weeks, and they're there. So from a talent perspective, Mexico is very close. From a supply chain perspective, it's very close. Here, the US is a bit negative. We only have 24 free trade agreements with the world. Mexico is 54. So from a global supply chain perspective, I can get into Mexico super easy, tax-free, and then I can get back over to the border into the US. So the proximity of Mexico was important. It was either be a Michigan close to Canada, because they have 52 free trade agreements, or be close to Mexico.
Yeah, you don't want to be Michigan. No.
That's why we're here.
No, not Michigan. It's too cold. It's too, yeah. Good choice. Yeah, thank you. So we're talking about supply chain, and as a result of COVID-19, we as a country realized our supply chain vulnerabilities. Many companies are looking at nearshoring or reshoring back to the United States, and Texas is on the list of a lot of that interest and appears to be at the center of this massive transportation and trade hub. I just want to get both of your thoughts on what you're seeing. Are you seeing a shift from Asian-based manufacturing back to the North American continent and to the Americas?
I'm going to take a struggle. No.
I'll go first then.
Sure.
Asia, in your words, I say China. What we're seeing is a massive outflow of China into countries like Vietnam, Malaysia, Thailand, Laos. China is losing manufacturing capabilities for lower cost countries in Asia. There is nearshoring, but a lot of people call that nearshoring already. It is not really. But back to the US, I think you're seeing more and more companies going back, but it has more to do with the global tax rules that the government is trying to bring in rather than really lowering costs.
Yeah.
We see China lowering its importance in the world, but we see other companies and other markets, mainly Vietnam, really booming at the moment. And that's coming back to the US too. But the cost of logistics at the moment is incredibly high, like any transportation cost. You do see companies making temporary solutions now in the US, but we really haven't seen a real switch of closing factories and bringing factories back.
Sure.
It's just temporary solutions.
Yeah. Or maybe the choice to not expand in Asia and expand
Absolutely.
closer.
Yes.
Yeah. Ken?
Yeah, I would just say on the point of where manufacturing could grow in the United States, it's not going to be in California. It'll be in places that are more welcoming to manufacturing industry. So California actually used to be a major manufacturing center. There were, I think, half a dozen major auto plants. GM, Chrysler, Ford all had auto plants in California. It was the center of the aviation manufacturing industry in the post-World War II period. There was major manufacturing in the state. It's almost all gone. So Tesla was sort of like one of the last. They took over a Saturn plant, I think.
Toyota.
Okay, yeah. Numi plant. That's what it was, right? In Fremont or something like that.
Yeah, Fremont.
Right? It was like the last survivor of auto manufacturing, from a legacy of a lot, right? And so this is just part of what you see of policies in a state, making it either more business friendly for manufacturing or less. And so internally within the United States, this actually happened to some extent with Detroit. A lot of the auto manufacturing moved out of Detroit and other sort of higher cost places into the South, right? And to lower cost places that didn't have as many sort of unionized workers and things like that. And it's controversial, right? But if businesses are making business judgments about where to, put manufacturing plants and hire folks, they're going to be making those kinds of decisions. I do think there's a possibility and opportunity for increasing manufacturing domestically in the United States, but it's going to be in places that are friendly to manufacturing.
Well, we believe that Made in Texas is a very powerful global brand, and we really support our manufacturing. I know that Toyota was probably the project that elevated Texas from a manufacturing standpoint, from an automotive manufacturing standpoint, certainly back in 2003, 20 plus years ago. And so now we're seeing growth in not just automotive, semiconductor, electric vehicle, just lots of food processing, just lots of different manufacturing that we're seeing, and we're very, very proud of it. And we're very welcoming. So by all means, we want them to look at Texas. And you mentioned logistics, and we also we've seen this past year, the ports in California, right, having a lot of difficulty.
Yep.
The Port of Houston today is one of the nation's busiest ports, and actually is #1 in terms of tonnage in the country. The Port of Laredo is the nation's largest inland port, and the Port of Corpus Christi moves more LNG out for export than any other port in the country. So all of this has helped establish Texas as the leader of the nation for exporting for 18 years in a row. So we're very proud of that, exceeding California and New York combined. How much influence does logistics and accessibility of logistics have in making corporate decisions?
A lot. I mean, really, really a lot. Shanghai to Los Angeles is 12 days. Shanghai to Houston is 18. That's 6 days capital tied up, full boat, you're talking billions of dollars. It makes a huge difference. What you have seen now with the backlog, especially in the port of LA, suddenly Galveston is coming into play, Houston is coming into play. Other places are becoming competitive because of lead time.
Yeah.
Houston has one big negative: you got to go to Panama. You don't have a choice if you want to go to Asia. So you lose 6 days. But the cost-wise, I think California is pricing itself out of the market. Houston cost, the local fees of discharging a container, getting it on a truck, moving it out is getting better. I think the investments that the state of Texas has made in their highway system is good. It needs more. I mean, I love driving on the I-35. But at least you're investing. I mean, if I look to the 1604 as our ring road, and I see how much construction is going on, but how fast it's going, it is like every day is a surprise of what they have done. So that just doesn't happen in other places in the country. So I'd say, if Houston and your other ports here are going to be globally competitive, or at least nationally competitive, you're always going to have the negative to Asia that you lose 6 days to go to Panama. You're not going to win that. But if your logistics and your infrastructure, your highways, your port facilities are efficient enough, you can overcome the 6 days. But don't misunderstand how important 6 days is. The second thing is air. San Antonio is, I'm not saying horrible, but pretty horrible when it comes to direct flights. Well, I see everybody agree. Houston is 3 hours. Austin is an hour and a half in a good day. And I think air, if you look at how much high-value goods are shipped air today, the air facilities in your bigger airports, they can use an upgrade. I mean, there I think other states have done it better. And you have so much here. I mean, we're in Port San Antonio. You have a huge airport there. Some of those facilities that we have in the state could be goods only or freight only, how you want to do that. I think you have a tremendous opportunity to really look at air freight, be super competitive, because to get out of Texas, you have a great network. Your highways are there, but to get into it, there's more that can be done from flexibility for air freight. The ports, you have an answer. Air freight, you have an answer. Now it's up to the politicians, just do it.
He's taking notes. Ken, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm fascinated by the 6 days, right? Because I live pretty close to the Port of LA, and logistics is a big part of the Southern California economy. It's, ships coming from China, Asia, into Los Angeles, Long Beach. Then they get the containers get put on trucks, and they're trucked out to the Inland Empire and warehoused, and so it's a big part of the economy. And I'm guessing the reason for that is because of proximity to China and Asia. That it's the shortest route to the United States is to park it in Los Angeles. And so I can see, like, if you're going to compete by, there's certain advantages to being in the middle of the United States, but there's certain disadvantages and on this one, and it's the 6 day. But if you want to try to sort of mitigate that disadvantage, you have to find ways to cut costs, all the things that you have said. So it made sense. And I also think that this little airport that I live near is called Ontario Airport in the Inland Empire. It's got, most of the planes that come in and out of there are freight planes. It's UPS, FedEx, Amazon, and so it's not passengers as much as it is goods, right? And so there's great opportunity, it seems to me, to upgrade, as I say, the airports around here to be that sort of connector on the trade front.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And Ontario is a great example of how you can have a passenger minority volume over goods. Our factory was in Moreno Valley, which is next door.
Yep.
It really works. Just
Thank you.
friendly advice.
No, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Wonderful to hear. And I actually sit on the Texas Department of Transportation's Freight Advisory Board. And we have a meeting at in 2 hours. I'll be joining that meeting, so I'm taking notes as well. But it's interesting. You always know Californian because you called it the 35 and the 1604, right?
Yes.
But that's okay. We'll get you talking Texan in a minute, in a little bit.
Give me a little time.
Yeah, a little time. Well, I want to open it up for any questions from the audience. If anybody, yes, ma'am?
I have a question about water, because I have lived in San Antonio most of my life, and water seems to always be an issue because of the aquifer and how we need to protect it. And what is the status of the aquifer, and what are the plans for bringing in enough water to support all this growth?
So I am not a local person.
I was going to say, we've had Jenna Salcedo over there.
Yeah, there we go.
Runs Greater SATX, and I'm sure she can easily
Yeah,
address
so
that.
I can tell you certainly the response that we provide to different folks. I'm not a water expert, nor am I an executive for the San Antonio water system, but the Vista Ridge pipeline project that they secured a few years back has solved for that need. So when we're out talking to prospects and even existing companies in San Antonio, water availability is no longer an issue. And we're having continued conversations on the power front, but keep in mind that CPS Energy is also one of the largest power producers within the state of Texas. So there's a lot of bureaucracy around these conversations, but we have the power and we have the water, and we can certainly deliver it for operations like these.
And Jenna hit on a topic that just sort of reminded me, when we work at the Economic Development and Tourism Office, it's always real exciting when you hear a headquarter relocation and the new company is in town and they get the newspaper article and whatnot, but we also work with the existing Texas companies. Who we have here is just as important as the new. So, our commitment to companies like DeLorean and like the others that are choosing Texas is, it's not just the announcement and goodbye and thanks and good luck. This is a partnership. This is a long-term partnership to make sure that they have what they need so that they can be successful. So they just turn from being a new company to an existing company, and we still support them and we still want them to grow and be successful. Another question? Yes, sir?
One second, get to Micah.
I have a question. Ken mentioned it very briefly, but you see the automobile industry is used to having unions. Starbucks employees just voted to unionize. At DeLorean, is that something that has been talked about? Is it something that is a concern, or what are the high-level thoughts on unionization?
There's two answers to that, a personal answer and a business answer. San Antonio for us is headquarters. So it is engineering, design, validation, sales and marketing. There's no role in manufacturing. In the automotive world, unionization of plants has mainly to do with manufacturing. And we're not having this play in Texas yet. I think the moment you need to negotiate labor with an entity is always a problem. If I have a problem with you, I want to come to you and have it out and solve our problem. When I have to talk to you to talk about the other 400 people that work for me, it just doesn't feel right. And that's a personal answer. It was not a consideration, simply because it is not something. I personally strongly believe, as an employer, you have primary responsibility to work with your employees. And if your work environment is as toxic that people are becoming desperate and try to get a union in, look in the mirror, man.
Okay. And the next question I think we had.
How you doing? How are you looking to solve the charging station issue with car companies, and are y'all also looking to cooperate with other electric car companies on that issue?
All right, I'll take that question. Okay, so picture this. My wife drives an electric car. She's been a fan since the first Nissan Leaf came out in 2008. And we drive from California in our beautiful Ford Mustang Mach-E and try to find chargers. Not a good idea. It took us a few days to get here because there's not a lot of chargers. And then we come to San Antonio and there's one fast charger in the whole city of San Antonio. That's at Walmart. And they have a bank of chargers from Electrify America. I mean, there's plenty of chargers, but they're level 2. So you go shopping, you spend a couple hours shopping, and you come back, you got 10 miles more. That doesn't work. So you need fast chargers. And fast chargers, there's only one in San Antonio. So then we wanted to go to Corpus Christi because the boys want to swim. There is no fast chargers there. There's one at a Mercedes dealer who happens to be open from Monday to Saturday. So if you go on the Sunday, you can't drive home. So that's not a good idea either. It is charging infrastructure. I'm not saying this is a desert, but yeah, charging is not resolved. Electric cars for most people are still a luxury purchase. The return on investment takes 7 years. Most people who buy a new car will flip it around in 4, so will never really reap the benefits of the economic side. It's a luxury choice today, especially with the cost of electricity here in Texas, which is very, very low. What you do see is that people charge at home. 97% of all electric vehicles in the US today are charged at home. So the 3% of the people that rely on long distance travel, there's no economic benefit. I mean, you have EVgo, ChargePoint, Electrify America, Blink. I mean, all the big networks that are out there, there's zero ROI yet. The US really hasn't made that flip to electric yet. California, last year, 12% of all cars sold were electrified, so either plug-in or full electric. But even there, public charging is people don't charge at the public. It's very expensive and it's not very convenient. We pay here, what, 14 cents a kilowatt at home? When I go to Electrify America, it's 32 if I'm not a member. So the gap, people vote with their wallet. And if there's no financial incentive to drive electric cars, high upfront cost, high insurance, lower maintenance, much cheaper to run. But if the whole picture doesn't make sense, it's not a problem that we're going to solve over the next few years. Europe, I mean, I'm used to $12 a gallon. Every time I go to the gas station here, it's like, oh my goodness, this is wonderful. and I see half the people crying at the pump. So it's not an easy question to solve today. I think we need to focus on making sure that builders put at least 200 amps into a house. You can have a 50 amp charger. You can charge overnight. I think we do need more chargers here, and not just as level 2s. When you go to La Cantera, you have these nice boards from Volta where you can charge for free because it doesn't add enough range. You have to also remember that 30% of the US population lives in high density housing, apartments. Where are you going to go there to charge? Before electrification for the mass public, it's becoming possible. The pricing of vehicles need to halve. The charging infrastructure needs to go tenfold, and we're still far away from that. I think California is reaching a financial point now where the pain at the pump is big enough for people who own a home to actually make that determination. But the large population side in California doesn't have a home. They live in apartments. They're not going to be able to make that change. It's a bad answer, I know, but it is just the truth of where we are today.
It's the truth. Yeah, thank you. Well, we're going to wrap up our session. Oh,
one quick question.
Quick question.
When are we going to see DeLorean driving around San Antonio? The guys over here that would love to have one at an event. We're excited about it. I grew up in the 80s. I'm a car guy. We would love to see DeLoreans around San Antonio. What's the ETA on that?
We're getting our first car flown to Pebble Beach in August. We're building it in Europe at the moment, and the prototypes. I think you'll start seeing something late next year on the road around here. The prototypes, the testing validation cars, mainly with Southwest Research Institute, which is another one of those things, those pearls in San Antonio. At most, it's the biggest diamond you can think. I mean, it's phenomenal what these people do there. It's another one of those draws to San Antonio that we don't talk enough about.
well, great question. And the last statistic I'm going to leave you with, and this is recent news, Texas now leads the nation in the most Fortune 500 headquarter companies. We beat out New York and California, so we now have 53. And actually, with Caterpillar's announcement yesterday, we now have 54. So hopefully soon, we'll be adding DeLorean to that list as you all make your way up. But thank you all very much. Thank you to our speakers.
Thank you so much. On behalf of the North San Antonio Chamber, we want to thank you for all you guys do. Thank you for bringing your book. Please go purchase his book. That's a plug from the Chamber on our half, and he does not want to haul it home, believe me. Or you can just make your home here, and then you just have a short drive. So just a little plug here. But I also just want to thank Jenna. Thank you. Thank you for all you do on behalf of the Chamber and being such a proponent of San Antonio. We appreciate everything that Greater SATX does for us. But that concludes our program. Our next program like this, Innovators and Leaders, will be on August 25th. So look at the Chamber website and make sure you reserve your seats now. But thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.